In the quiet, picturesque city of Strasbourg, nestled near the German border, the air usually hums with the polite anticipation of a prestigious tune-up event. The Internationaux de Strasbourg is, by all traditional accounts, the prologue to the grand drama of Roland Garros. It is where the elite fine-tune their sliding, where the veterans seek one last burst of momentum before descending upon Paris. But this year, the atmosphere has shifted. Something is happening on the outer courts, far from the television cameras and the reserved seating of the center court, that has fundamentally disrupted the hierarchy of the tournament. The French public, known for their discerning and often stoic appreciation of tennis, are turning their heads away from the top 10 seeds and toward a qualifying draw. This is the Strasbourg paradox. Usually, the qualifying rounds of the WTA 500 event are a ghost town, populated only by die-hard scouts and family members. Yet, in 2026, the hottest ticket in town isn't for a former Grand Slam champion or a world number one. It is for a young woman from Quezon City, who is currently forced to earn her way into the main bracket. Alexandra Eala has arrived, and the shock waves are being felt from the clay of Alsace all the way to the executive offices of the WTA. To understand why France is currently captivated by a qualifier, we have to look past the scoreboards and into the psychological evolution of a sport that is desperate for its next great protagonist. For years, the narrative surrounding Alex Eala was one of potential. She was a crown jewel of the Rafael Nadal Academy, the promising junior who carried the hopes of a nation that had never truly seen itself reflected in the upper echelons of professional tennis. But potential is a heavy burden. It is a debt that many young athletes never manage to repay. What we are witnessing in Strasbourg is the moment that debt is settled in full. The Future Prospect label has been unceremoniously burned, replaced by a reality that is far more dangerous to the established elite. Eala is no longer a guest in the house of professional tennis. She is threatening to take the keys. The implication here is massive. If a player from the Philippines, a country without a deep historical infrastructure for world-class tennis, can dominate the conversation in the heart of Europe, it signals a permanent shift in the geopolitical landscape of the sport. We are seeing the decentralization of tennis power in real time. But there is a mystery at the heart of this surge. How did a player who struggled in the early clay swing of Stuttgart and Madrid suddenly become the most feared floater in the world? What happened in the weeks between the Spanish dirt and the French qualifying rounds that turned a developmental player into a wild storm? The answer lies in a series of calculated risks and a mental metamorphosis that we will dissect today. This is not just a story about a tennis tournament. This is a study of how a dangerous floater becomes a cultural icon, and why the established stars in Strasbourg main draw are suddenly very, very nervous about a girl who, on paper, shouldn't even be on their radar yet. To appreciate the gravity of the present, we must first look at the crucible from which Alexandra Eala emerged. For most of the 2020s, the blueprint for a tennis star was rigid. You were either a product of the Eastern European power-hitting factories or a blue-chip recruit from the American or French academies. Eala represented a third path, one fraught with much higher stakes. When she moved to Mallorca to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy, she wasn't just representing herself. She was a proof of concept for the idea that elite talent could be exported from Southeast Asia and refined by the greatest clay court mind in history. But the transition from the junior circuits, where she was a Grand Slam champion, to the brutal, grinding reality of the WTA Tour was not a linear ascent. It was a battle of attrition. In 2024 and 2025, Eala was often viewed as a technical player, someone with beautiful strokes and a high tennis IQ who lacked the raw, explosive power to end points against the giants of the top 50. The critics said she was too small, that her serve would be a liability, and that she would eventually plateau as a solid top 100 journeyman. Then came the 2026 season. It began with a whisper in the Middle East. In Dubai, Eala showed flashes of a new, more aggressive identity. She wasn't just counterpunching. She was dictating. She followed this with gritty performances in Indian Wells and Miami, proving she could handle the world-class pace of the hard courts. But the real test was always going to be the red clay. This is the most honest surface in tennis. It doesn't allow for cheap points. It demands physical endurance, tactical patience, and a soul-crushing level of mental fortitude. When the tour moved to Europe, the initial results were sobering. Early exits in Stuttgart and Madrid suggested that perhaps the gap was still too wide. But those losses were deceptive. Behind the scenes, a recalibration was occurring. Eala and her team weren't chasing points. They were chasing specific clay court maturity. They were learning how to use her lefty angles not just to move opponents, but to hurt them. They were building a version of Alex Eala that could survive a 20-shot rally and then find the winner on the 21st. The explosion happened in Rome. The Italian Open is often the final exam before the French Open, and Eala passed it with a distinction that terrified the locker room. Her run to the third round wasn't just a statistical anomaly. It was a statement of intent. When she stepped onto the court against Elena Rybakina, one of the most devastating hitters in the history of the women's game, the expectation was a quick, professional dismantling. Rybakina is the prototype of the modern power game. But what the fans in Rome saw was a Filipina player who refused to be intimidated. Eala didn't just survive Rybakina's pace. She redirected it. She took the thunder of a Grand Slam champion and used it to light up the scoreboard. Even though she ultimately bowed out, she left the court in Rome as a different player than the one who arrived. She had earned the respect of the dirt. This brings us to the current frenzy in Strasbourg. Why is she in the qualifying draw? Because the rankings often lag behind the reality of a player's form. On paper, her ranking required her to go through the qualifiers. In reality, she is playing top 20 tennis. This creates a fascinating and somewhat unfair dynamic for the rest of the field. In the world of tennis, a qualifier is supposed to be a warm-up act. Usually, the spotlight is reserved for the top 10 stars, the Grand Slam champions, or the established veterans whose names are etched into the trophies. But Eala has flipped the script. The symbolism of her presence in the qualifying bracket is heavy. It represents the wild storm entering through the back door. There's an old saying in tennis. The most dangerous player in the draw isn't the number one seed. It's the player who has already won 3 matches in qualifying and found their rhythm. Eala is that player, but with the added pedigree of a superstar in waiting. Let's look at the why factor behind the French fascination. France is a nation that prides itself on loose tennis, a style of play that emphasizes craft, variety, and intelligence. They see in Eala a throwback to a more sophisticated era, but updated with 2026 athleticism. She isn't a ball basher. When you watch her play on clay now, you see a masterclass in construction. She uses the full width of the court. She understands the geometry of the slide. She knows when to take the ball early to rob an opponent of time, and when to sit back and craft a looping, heavy topspin shot that pushes a power hitter into the back advertisement boards. This tactical evolution is the hidden motive behind her success. She has realized that she doesn't need to be bigger than her opponents. She just needs to be smarter. But there is also a deeper, more emotional layer to this story. For the Filipino community and the broader Asian tennis world, Alex Eala is a cultural breakthrough. For decades, the conversation about Asian tennis was dominated by 3 powers: Japan, China, and South Korea. When you thought of an Asian star, you thought of Lee Na's grit or Naomi Osaka's explosive power. Southeast Asia was a footnote by becoming a headline attraction in a European tournament. Eala is breaking a psychological ceiling. She is insisting that the door be open for an entire region. When analysts in France talk about her, they aren't just talking about her forehand anymore. They're using terms like dangerous floater, a term used for players so talented that no seeded star wants to see them in their section of the draw. To be a floater is to be a ghost in the machine. You are the person who can ruin $1 million marketing plan for a tournament by knocking out the top seed in the first round. Now, let's play devil's advocate for a moment, as any objective journalist must. Is this all just hype? Are we over-indexing on a few good weeks in Rome and a high-profile training background? A skeptic would point out that Eala still has much to prove. The WTA Tour is littered with the careers of next big things who won a few qualifying matches and then vanished under the pressure of the main stage. One could argue that her lack of a big weapon like a 120-mile-per-hour serve will eventually limit her ceiling. On the faster courts of Wimbledon or the U.S. Open, can she survive the sheer velocity of the Tour's elite? Furthermore, the pressure of being a national icon can be a double-edged sword. Every match she plays is scrutinized by millions back home. That kind of emotional weight can lead to burnout or fear of failure that paralyzes a player's game in high-pressure moments. However, the counter argument is found in her mental resilience. What we saw in 2026 is a player who has learned how to live on the surface. In previous years, when she was pushed by a stronger opponent, her game would sometimes fray at the edges. She would try to go for too much, too early. In Strasbourg, the energy is different. She is patient. She is fighting mentally even when the points go against her. There's a calm to her game that wasn't there 12 months ago. This is the biggest evolution of her 2026 season. She has moved from trying to win to knowing how to win. And this is where the story gets truly interesting for the future of the sport. A player who is gaining confidence is far scarier than a superstar who is under pressure to defend points. The top seeds in Strasbourg are playing not to lose. Alexandra Eala is playing to take what she believes is hers. That psychological disparity is why she's become the main attraction. The French public loves an underdog, but more than that, they love a revelation. They are witnessing the birth of a new reality in women's tennis, and they want to be able to say they saw it first on a side court in Strasbourg. As we look toward the horizon, we have to ask ourselves, what does the world of tennis look like 5 years from now because of what is happening this week? If we project forward to 2031, the Alex Eala effect will likely be felt in ways that transcend the rankings. We are looking at the potential for a massive commercial and grassroots explosion in Southeast Asia. Just as Yao Ming changed the NBA's relationship with China, or Manny Pacquiao changed boxing's relationship with the Philippines, Eala is the bridge. She is the proof that the path from a Manila tennis club to the Philippe Chatrier court in Paris is not just a dream. It is a viable professional trajectory. In 5 years, Eala will no longer be the wild storm. She will be the establishment. We will likely see a generation of young players from across Asia who cite the specific 2026 clay court swing as a moment they realize they can compete with the best in the world. The technical blueprint she is laying down now, the tactical use of the lefty forehand, the emphasis on mental endurance over raw power, will become the new standard for undersized players looking to break into the top 10. But there is a more immediate consequence. The French Open is just days away. By the time the main draw is released in Paris, the qualifier from Strasbourg will be the name that every top-seeded player is looking for with a sense of dread. If she makes a deep run at Roland Garros, it won't just be a sports story. It will be the definitive proof that the traditional power structures of tennis have been disrupted. The shock that France is feeling right now is the realization that the next great queen of clay might not come from the usual places. She might come from a country where the sun always shines, bringing a wild storm that no one saw coming until it was already too late to stop it. The story of Alexandra Eala in Strasbourg is a reminder that in professional sports, momentum is the only currency that truly matters. Rankings are history. Form is the present. As the qualifying draw concludes and the main event begins, the eyes of the tennis world will remain fixed on a young woman who turned a preliminary round into a prestige documentary. She has already won the most important battle. She has forced the world to stop looking at her as a future prospect and start dealing with her as a present threat. The final thought I want to leave you with is this. Greatness is rarely a sudden explosion. It is a slow, steady accumulation of moments where you refuse to back down. It is a decision to treat a qualifying match in Strasbourg with the same intensity as a final in Paris. It is the ability to turn a shock into a standard. Alexandra Eala is no longer just a name on a bracket. She is a shift in the wind. And if you're a fan of the game, you'd better hold on tight, because the storm is just getting started. If you found this deep dive into the evolution of the 2026 tennis season insightful, consider subscribing to the channel for more long-form investigative pieces on the athletes and stories that are redefining the world of sports. We'll be following the clay court season all the way to the final point at Roland Garros, analyzing the technical and psychological shifts that the mainstream media often misses. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.